Thank you for joining in and tuning in to Fearless Project Podcast. We're so glad that you're here today. And just as a reminder, what Fearless Project Podcast is, it's a podcast about going deeper into the fears that hold us back from living our lives to the fullest. Often we feel so alone in our fears that we become overwhelmed. And in a world of mental health being on the rise, this podcast exists to bring our conversations to light on those fears. And if we weren't here, would anyone notice? Feeling inadequate, not feeling good enough, feeling like you're alone in whatever you are trying to deal with. And this podcast is specifically to talk about those exact fears, the conversations, the journeys of our guests, such as today, which is an honor and privilege to just introduce you guys to Sarah Stone. She's not only an amazing speaker, an amazing organizer for Theology by the Pint, but also just such a great mentor to me. Aww. And someone that I feel is the same in our Bible study, just as you are anywhere outside as well.
So, you've already stolen one of my lines that I was going to say later. That's great. Okay, it's a wrap.
It's a wrap. But with that, our speaker today will be speaking about the fear of not being liked. And her name is Sarah Stone, as I mentioned before. And so welcome to today's podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is so fun. I love it.
Yeah, I'm so glad. And before we begin, we would like for you to take time to introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, you already said, man, so many nice things. So yeah, my name is Sarah Stone. I am a single mom. I worked for a long time in ministry and then pivoted. I'm still in ministry, but a different kind. I run Theology by the Pint, the artist formerly known as Theology on Tap, where we get people together over craft beer and good friends and kind of controversial, spicy conversation around questions that everybody wrestles with. But questions around life and faith and the Bible and religion and God and if there is a God and what he's like and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I enjoy long walks on the beach. I'm kidding. No one likes long walks on the beach. People like short walks on the beach.
Yeah.
But no, I play guitar. I love to cook.
Wow.
I love to play games. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah. I will say your cooking is amazing.
Oh, thank you.
I do get to partake in this and it is amazing. So if you guys ever get a chance to meet her, maybe like actually get to know her, but just letting you know, she's a great cook.
Oh.
So we have an icebreaker that we ask every single guest that comes on our podcast, which is, tell me about a time when something didn't happen the way you wanted it to, but it was actually better.
Yeah. It's funny because I'm much older than you, so there's so many answers to this question. But the one that comes to mind is every breakup that I've had. So I've been divorced now for like 14 years. So I've dated a fair amount in that time. And every time I'm one of those people that like loves like super passionately and super big. And then when it ends, it's just like the end of the world, right? Your heart is just broken. And I'm here to say, I think heartache is one of the worst pains we can feel like in this world. And I've felt a variety of pains. It's awful. And every time I just think, why? But every time it's the right thing. Like that wasn't the right person. It's not the person that I'm going to grow with best. And we're going to make each other happy and be pointing toward Christ and all of those things. So you look back and you're like, oh man, I was so sad about this, but it was actually the right decision, you know?
Oh, that's such a good one. I feel like many people can relate, especially at all stages of life. So that's a really good one.
Yeah.
So to begin, I know we're going to be talking about the fear of not being liked.
Yeah.
I wanted to see if you can walk me through what does that fear look like?
Yeah. It's so funny to be answering your questions because I'm like, well, I hope they like what I say. And that's the whole thing, right? Like that I don't need to fear whether I'm likable or not. But I do hope that this is relatable because I think a lot of people struggle with this. Yeah. Fear of not being liked looks like the practical way it looks is just like feeling anxiety around even before a social. I'm an extrovert. I'm not afraid of like throwing a party. It's not that kind of thing, but being afraid that people might not have fun or they might not like the way I've done it or they might think it's dorky or stupid or whatever. It's also just like that social worry that people aren't going to think your stories are interesting or your jokes are funny or that you're smart, right? But it's also just fear of rejection, like fear that at the end of a gathering or a friendship or a interaction of some kind that someone won't want to be my friend or they'll have a better friend. You know that feeling of like being on Instagram and you see someone you think you're close friends with and they refer to someone else as like their best friend or something and you're like, what? Yes. All of that is a part of it. But yeah, those when I was thinking about this episode, the three things that kept coming to mind are smart, interesting, funny. Those for me are the things that I want to be perceived as. And so if I worry that I'm not, like if I make a joke that doesn't quite land, I'm like, oh, now I have to be extra smart because the funny is out the window, anyway.
Do you think we develop those like things that we want everybody else to think of us, to perceive from us, like in our young life, in our middle ground? Like, when do you think we get those, like, this is the three things, or these are the things?
All of those things. I mean, I used to be a therapist, and so that whole nature versus nurture thing is fascinating. But I would contend, I didn't know you were going to ask this, but I think that it's actually something we unlearn. I think little kids don't worry about this kind of stuff. Yeah. They are just themselves. And they think that if they tell a funny joke, if you ever hear a child tell a joke, 100% they think it's funny. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's something that we have been, like, it's been worked out of us. Like some messaging you got in your life, maybe from yourself, maybe from someone else, maybe from the culture we live in, which is super high cancel culture, create your own image on, social media, has told us, no, you're not this enough, you're not that enough. So I think we actually unlearn the ability to think you're enough,
Wow. Yeah.
But we're going to get to that word enough later because that's a little bit of a tricky word.
Yeah. And how long would you say that you like lived with this fear? And like, I guess like if you can walk us through your journey of like, when did it start?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I'm not over this. Yeah. Like I still struggle with this, and I have to remind myself the things I'm going to be talking about today. Yeah. All the time. And I don't, but like I recognized it probably in the since my divorce. I've noticed it, and that story is part of it. I mean, every teenager struggles with this, right? Like every teenager wants to not be rejected by your peers and that kind of stuff. So that's natural. And I'm an extrovert, and extroverts always want to be like the life of the party. And when you're not, that's disappointing. But this extra layer of really like, oh no, people aren't going to like me, I think probably was born out of a couple of really yucky relationships. Yeah. I don't know if you want me to get into this now or.
Yeah, you can.
In graduate school, I had a relationship with a boyfriend that I didn't realize because I'd had such good boyfriends before, and he was sneaky about it. He was just very critical, like really critical. Not like the kind of criticism that you need in a good relationship where it's like, hey, I don't know if you realize you're doing this, but da-da-da. And then I got married to someone who was also hypercritical. And so all of those things that I've listed, those are particular sort of platforms for me to feel good or bad because they were the things that were knocked down, right? Yeah. And the messaging was so strong over months and then years of, and some of it was unintentional, right? Like being like, people make jokes all the time, but you're so dumb. Like, don't do that. That's a terrible thing to say to someone. And I'm sure that I do this kind of thing too, but every time you hear those messages, a little part of you is like, oh, maybe that's true, that I am not smart, or that, you tell a story and someone makes a joke like, oh, that was great. Do you have time to tell that again? Like you miss sometimes, but every time people say that kind of stuff, especially if you're in a relationship with someone that's supposed to be so loving, and they don't do that, they only tear down, they don't build up, then you start to believe them. I was seeing a counselor for a while who gave me a book to read about dealing with people that are kind of hypercritical, maybe narcissistic, and this counselor and the book together sort of explained to me that when you're in a relationship like that, especially for a long time, you only have two avenues out of it. You can escape, and escape looks like, that could be drugs, that could be getting out of the relationship, like a divorce, breakup, or could be suicide. And so that's the escape path, and the only other path is to believe those lies. So if you start to believe them, then that looks like actually you've internalized that now. So I think that was a big part of it for me, was being in those relationships. And then coming out of it, it took a while to kind of, in fact, I'll tell you a sweet story. If my mom listens to this, she'll appreciate this. When I was separated, not yet divorced, but kind of trying to come back to life a little bit, I decided, it was New Year's Eve, I was going to throw a party in the same city where I had gone to college. So my parents now live in the same city where I went to college. So I was like, I wonder if I could get some of my old college friends together and like have a mafia party.
Ooh, fun.
It was. And so I like just sent out a thing on Facebook, and to a few friends that I actually had their email addresses. I hadn't kept up with these people in forever. And And all these people started RSVPing that they were going to come.
Wow.
And I remember saying to my mom, like, this is crazy. Like, why would these people all be saying yes?
Yeah.
And she kind of like detected the moment needed to happen. And she was like, Sarah, don't you know that you're fun to be around? And that was like a shocking thing for me to hear. I mean, I started crying because it was like, oh, I had actually forgotten that. I had forgotten that I have something to bring to this situation. And yeah. So it was a period of relearning that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I think with you saying that, like, it makes you think of like, you know, how oftentimes when you do believe a life, it actually makes the way that you live your life a certain way. So like with that, like how, like, what would you say that it held you back from living your life to fullest, and how did that look like? Like, how was it like what was the thing that was stopping you from moving?
Yeah, I mean, it still keeps me from living my life to the fullest. A lot less so now. Like, I struggle with this so much less. But, I mean, obviously, because you're always thinking about, well, first of all, you're always thinking about yourself. I mean, this is where we're going to get into. Like, this is the problem with this, right? It's really idolatry. It's like, I am the most important thing, and if I'm not at my best, right? But so a lot of time thinking about yourself, a lot of time worrying, spinning the wheels of anxiety, but also, and this is a little precursor to sort of the lie and the truth of it all, is that you're not actually living for the right audience. And that will deplete the heck out of you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, imagine having a good boss and a bad boss, and you're always spinning your wheels trying to please the bad boss. But imagine if you had a good boss, like, or even a good king, right? And you're living in a kingdom with a good king. Like, everything is different because you're just so free, because you already know that you're loved and you're taken care of. So I think the fullness that as believers, like we think there is a fuller life. It's a weird thing that Christians say. We talk about this like abundant life or full life, but that's part of it, is this like, sort of feeling. Here's a very funny story, like just a microcosm, so dumb. But I am totally addicted to Diet Coke from McDonald's. This is in my McDonald's cup from earlier, this water now, but I get a Diet Coke from McDonald's every day. And when I was married, my ex-husband would give me such grief about, it's so bad for you, whatever. And it was a little thing, like couples do that to each other, right? But it was a little thing that over time was like, can I just have a Diet Coke in peace? Good grief. The day that I got divorced and left the courtroom, it was November, crisp, beautiful day. And I walked out of the courtroom and I felt so free that I was like, I'm getting a Diet Coke right now. And that Diet Coke tasted so good. Best Diet Coke of my life. Obviously, well, it was from McDonald's, so it was a good mix. But it tasted so good because it was something that I had in this new free space without that judgment, right? I mean, it's like a kind of a sermon illustration, you know, like this is, obviously I'm not telling everyone go get a Diet Coke and or get divorced, right? But but when you are free from all of those messages, and you're living for an audience of one, then the things that bring you happiness bring you even more happiness.
Yes. But when you're talking about audience, I think that is very prevalent even to my life and other people's life. Like, how do you know, like, whose opinion matters?
Yeah.
You know, like, who do you go to? Like, because the thing is, like, sometimes you can, it's even the same for criticism. Like, criticism.
Who are you going to take it from?
Who are you going to take it from? And I think that's a question that I believe that many audience members, including myself, would ask that. Like, how do you, because you can be, let's paint the picture of, like, being in a social environment. You have friends that know you for years, and even within those friendships, you have friends that know you in a surface level.
Yeah.
You have friends that know you in a deep level.
Yeah.
And then you have those that are just brand new. They don't know anything. It's like a clean slate.
Yeah.
Let's say you're receiving criticism for all of them. How would you explain it? Like, explain how in a social environment that way, and we can make it more real if there's like something that you can relate to. Feel free to express it to our audience. But like, how should someone navigate even
who they're listening to?
Yeah, exactly.
Gosh, that is a very good question. A couple things come to mind. When I was little, my dad used to say that if you're giving criticism, it should hurt you. Like if I needed to tell you something that I knew was going to be hard to hear, that we should have the kind of relationship, we should be close enough, and I should love you enough that knowing I'm going to have to give that information is going to do that thing, that like cringy kind of feeling to me. But I love you enough that I'm going to do it anyway. If it doesn't hurt me at all, if I'm just dispensing criticism left and right, I'm the problem, right? So I think the kind of people Like we all know people that are telling people left and right how they need to improve their lives or whatever. If it's coming easy to them, they may not be the people to listen to. You know what I mean? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I want whoever is giving me criticism to be someone that is looking toward the same North Star that I'm looking at. So the way that I live my life, and I have not done this perfectly, and I won't do it perfectly, but when my life works best, it's because I'm aiming myself at what I think is true, and that's the Lord. I'm talking about the God of the Bible, God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, that whole package. If I'm aiming myself there, and this other person is also aiming themselves there, then presumably we are moving in the same direction. And I can trust them. Yeah. And then the last thing I'd say is, I think any bit of advice you get or constructive criticism or whatever, you can compare it against what you know to be true. Yes. Right? Like you can, if scripture is your guide and it's mine, you can look to that, or someone else you already know and trust. You can say, hey, Leslie told me that my breath is really bad. And then I can ask somebody else, like, is it bad? If they're like, yeah, I'm like, okay, so now I can trust Leslie, right? Yeah. Right. Sorry if my breath is bad.
It's not. You're good. So speaking of the truth and the lie, how would you say, if you were to, I know we're saying this is the fear of not being liked, but what is that lie that you would keep hearing? What is that rehearsing lie that would creep in during that had in the past and that probably still is in this journey? Yeah. Okay. So I think this is one of the trickiest ones because the lie itself is wrapped up in another lie. I'll tell you what I mean. Okay. I think the initial message that if you just start to think about this is like that I'm not enough. But the sad reality is that you're actually not enough. And what I mean by that is, I mean, people are lovely and wonderful, and I believe that we're all made in God's image. And so people have dignity and worth and value. That said, I think our culture today says, if you are these things, then you're enough. If you are a kind person, if you're whatever. But as Christians, like one of the things we believe is that we are all tinged with this kind of rebellious spirit. Sometimes we call that sin, right? Like we all do things wrong. We're all flawed. We're all imperfect. So what I think the lie is the oldest lie, literally in the book, in the world, which is that I can be the arbiter of my own happiness. I can be the author of my own life. I can be the queen of my own life, the God of my own life. Yeah. And so what happens is I've made all these other people the audience, but really I've made myself the audience. Because at the end of the day, I'm going to go home and I'm going to say, oh, you know, Leslie seemed like she really liked the party and so I am awesome. Or like, you know, if I judge your critique of me to be better than somebody else's, I'm still the final say so. Yeah. So I'm the God of my own life. It's this kind of self-idolization. So the lie is that I live for myself. Yeah. I am my own God. I mean, this is what was whispered in the Garden of Eden, if you believe that story is true, and I do, that what Satan said, what the snake says, is you can be like God. And the whole point is that we're not like God. But thanks be to God, because he is going to help us and rescue us and bring us into this freedom. Yeah. So I think that's the lie. That I can be enough because I can curate that and I can, be my own Lord. That's so good. That was really good. Yeah, because you're right. Like there's a lie within the lie. Yeah. And it's like, it's crazy to think, but in retrospect, like I feel like that is how society is like aiming towards, which is like, you know, what is your truth? And like, and then just kind of also being like, okay, what do you believe about yourself? Because you're right. At the end of the day, like the one that has the final say is you, especially after you heard everything. Who are you going to listen to? That also plays a role. But and let me say something else about that too, real quick. If you believe this lie that you can be enough, if telling that to somebody is actually one of the most cruel things you can do, because they're going to realize at some level that they're not. And then what are they left with? Yeah. If I'm like, Leslie, everything you need is within you. You can do this. And then you realize I can't actually do this without the help of something outside of me. Yes. Then you're trapped. And then you're spinning your wheels. Yeah. I'm going to try to be prettier. I'm trying to be smarter. I'm going to try to curate my image on social media better. Like it's just this ongoing rat race. The most loving thing we can do is tell people you're not enough and that's okay because Christ is enough. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but I want to make sure that got said. No, I'm glad you interrupted because I think that's the perfect thing to say. And I think that many people out there will need to hear that, because
Yeah.
I know that it can be a place where if you're trapped in this lie, and you are trying to do everything you can to be pretty enough, to be a certain whatever image that is,
Yeah.
like enter image of self
Yeah, yeah.
here, you know, then it just can become exhausting
And lonely.
and lonely.
Yeah.
And then if nobody else knows and you don't share that with someone else, then that can also become something very burdensome in your life. And then it can just become something that looks way bigger than what it really was. And I think with that, I wanted to also ask about your journey. So you just define the lie right now, and we'll get to the truth in a little bit, but I want to hear about that middle ground, that journey that you went through as you were walking this out. I know you're still walking it out now, because it's
Sure.
always going to be a journey, but I think that you know, getting to that truth from here like to there, can you explain what that journey looked like? And whether that be, I know we talked about your husband, if you want to talk about a relationship and also a friendship viewpoint, I think our audience could really benefit from that as well.
Yeah, so I think a few things. While I was in that relationship, you've heard people talk about like abused spouse syndrome. Like the woman that keeps going back to the guy that's beating her, and everyone else is like, why are you doing that? Instead of asking, why is he beating her? But that's a whole other conversation. But part of the reason that happens is, like I said earlier, because you believe this thing to be true. So I believed a lot of things. And by the way, these are not all because of some bad man in my life. Some of these are my own doing. Like I fell into a trap, whether it's with a girlfriend or just my own weird stuff I had to work out, but where I believed that I was not smart or funny or interesting or pretty or whatever the thing is. And y'all, I'm amazing. No, I'm kidding. But I'm joking. But I actually had to start, I remember my husband and I were trying to work through some stuff, and we met with this mentor couple, and I should have known this because I was already a therapist, but I needed somebody else to tell me to have a couple of like phrases or true things in my pocket, like proverbial pocket, like in my mind, that when I started to feel those things, I would actually say to myself. So like, this is very silly, but when I was in college, they had like switched the way that they measure the SATs. And so I got a letter and it was like, hey, using our new, algorithm, your new SAT score will be such and such. And also you've qualified for Mensa. Now, I never did Mensa because that's really nerdy. I'm sorry if there's any Mensa people out there. But the fact that I qualified for it, I just tucked that away. Yeah. And then later when I would think I'm not very smart, I'd be like, but I qualified for Mensa. And I would just say that to myself, or remember the score you got on your, I mean, that's kind of silly, but it would like tell me a true thing in the midst of it. Yeah. So believing those false things and living in that is part of what that looked like. And then being, you end up being like actually inauthentic when you're making new friendships, especially friendships with women. Women and women are such a complicated thing. Yeah. Good grief. We are not very kind to each other sometimes. So then I try to be the thing that I think they're going to want. So like, oh, this woman likes, I perceive that this is a sort of woman that would want me to be this way. So I would try to like maybe talk a certain way or talk about certain things or whatever. Which is, by the way, exhausting. Yeah. Like, if you are just when you said that thing at the beginning about I'm the same person here as I am somewhere else, man, that's just like, a beautiful thing to hear, because it means I'm finally living with this kind of integrity where I'm just being me. Yeah. And some people aren't going to like that. But some people are. Yeah. So that was a piece of it, right? Like believing the lie while in the relationship, being sort of a false person after to try to get people to like me. And then the third thing that comes to mind is I actually found myself shifting my worldview to try to make the world happy. So I won't get into the details on that because I don't want to alienate half the audience, like how you vote or whatever, I don't know. But whether it was like politically what I thought or spiritually what I thought, I found myself, if I'm in a certain audience or living in the city that I live in and the way that, sort of people, there are some viewpoints that are more celebrated than others, whether that's how you view some part of theology or how you vote, whatever. And I would find myself trying to say like, well, what's the most popular thing? I'm that. Like so much so that I actually believed it myself for a while. I believed that I thought X or Y or Z when I actually believed A, B, and C or ought to have. And I later got to the point where I realized that I had been really disobedient to the Lord who I believe is the creator of the universe and my rescuer and my Lord and my King. Like, why would I do that?
Yeah.
So that other people would like me? Like, I'd rather say something that's true rather than something that's likable now.
Ooh, that's good. That's really, really good. I think that also like speaks into like popularity.
Yes.
And like, and you know, just like being that person that is always on the right side or like, you know, and you never know what that is until you come to yourself and you're like, again, like, what is that anchor?
Yeah.
Who are you? Who's the real audience that you want to lean on? And from there, being able to decipher and be like, being okay with being unpopular. I think that that sometimes is like a really hard thing to like admit. I think many people would prefer to say, either they prefer to say like, oh, I don't really care about popularity, but then they're already in that popular status.
Right.
Or they're in that side where it's like, oh no, I care about what's popular because if this is popular, then this is what's right.
Yes.
And then like,
that's good.
Yeah. You know, and it's not only just about like what's right with certain stance, but even what's right about yourself.
Yes.
And I think that can also be, like you said, it's in coming into the beginning, it's like, who are you listening to? What's your audience? And I think that's very important. So from there, we're going to get to my favorite part, which is what is the truth that you got to? And if you want to talk about that truth and how it lives out and how it plays out today, I would love to hear that too.
Yeah. So the truth is that my life is lived for an audience of one. And because I believe that God is real and that, like I have said a couple of times, he created this whole world. He created me. He loves me. He's rescued me from all of this stuff that we've been talking about today. And he has a plan for me to be free and at peace, even now, but especially into eternity. Because I believe all of that, he is my audience. So whereas like pride and self-idolatry would have said, be likable, like be cool, be the kind of person that people will like, appear, you know, interesting, all that kind of stuff. Living in surrender to God says, be like Christ.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and that doesn't mean that I have to be a Middle Eastern man, you know, who wears sandals or whatever, but it means all of the attributes that people know about Christ, that he loved others, that he lived sacrificially, that he forgave, all of that, being Christ-like is now the true aim. And when I do that, it actually works really well. So I tell the truth, right? I love others. I sometimes will be not liked. In fact, sometimes I'll be straight up persecuted. I literally just got hate mail a couple weeks ago of someone saying terrible things about me. And there's nothing I can do about that. Like, that person does not like me. I don't know what to tell them. I have this written, I have like some notes in front of me that I actually believe that Jesus Christ is King. King of my life, King of this world, King of the universe. And if I think that, then if I live for him, everything will go better for me. I mean, think about the countries of the world where they have evil dictators and people have to live out of fear. But then think about, this might be tricky right now because our country is a little crazy, but when you have a good ruler of a good kingdom, you can just live in like that happiness.
Giving freedom of being able to just feel like I'm fine, I'm okay. Because I'm being taken care of in a sense. And
I can trust so in the Bible, there's this is it's a hard thing to swallow, especially if you're not in Bible land. But there's an imagery about being that I was once a slave to sin, and sin is just all the ways that we kind of rebel against what is true, right? But I was once a slave to sin, but now I'm a slave to Christ. And we think, oh, I don't want to be a slave to anybody. I want to be free. I want to be my own woman. But by the way, being a slave to a good master means you are free. But that's the whole point. Like, if you are a slave to someone that is all good, like perfect, that's a really good position to be in. Anyway.
Ooh, that's good. That's really good. I felt that. What does your life look like now as you're walking out in this truth?
What my life looks like now is that some people don't like me. And I have to kind of be okay with that. Or tell myself these true things again. I will say being older makes that a little easier. So I have 2 teenage kiddos right now. And so I've watched them like walk through the same kind of stuff that I did. I mean, although I think it's a million times worse with the internet and social media and TikTok and all that kind of stuff, because you've just taken, you know, people's perceptions of you and like cranked up the steroids on it. And, but so being older makes it a little bit easier, but it means that I'm living my life in integrity. I think that word we use that word sometimes to mean like honesty, and it kind of means honesty, but I think it means like the same thing across platforms, right? So we mentioned earlier being like the same person everywhere. I, shortly after my divorce, made a like conscious decision to myself, kind of a vow to myself, that I was going to be the same Sarah everywhere, which means I'm the same Sarah at church and at the club when I'm dancing, which I do, and it's so fun, which means sometimes people at the club are going to think I'm lame, and sometimes people at church are going to think I'm scandalous because I'm the same sort of me, right?
Yeah.
And it also means living in this way, that there's suffering. There's suffering because there is persecution and you know, the people that aren't going to like you because you're living, I don't know, for this audience of one, and it's not the audience they live for. But that suffering, I will say, when you asked the first question, the icebreaker, I almost said, out of every suffering that I have endured, and I have endured various kinds of it, I feel closer to the Lord. I feel more like my true self, like more human, more Sarah, more like in tune with what's true about the whole universe. Yeah. So it means there's more suffering, but suffering is somehow good. Yeah. Is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Not that I want any more of it. Like I'm fine. My punch card is full. I don't need any more, but I'm sure more is coming. And, you know, I'll try to count it all joy. That's a Bible verse that no one really likes, but it's in there. So. But I think you said it so well, like suffering is going to happen anyways. Like we live in this world where there are so many troubles that happen. I mean, people have anxiety over things at work, friendships, like you said, like navigating friendships is hard, y'all. Like, you know, I can attest to that as well. And then professionally, like there's just so many things that you have to face as an individual, as a human living in this world. And I think that also recognizing that like things will end. Like you're not going to always be in the suffering. Like there's always going to be an end to something and something else will start. Yeah. But it's like, how do you remain throughout all of the suffering, still just learning, evolving, but also having that like you said, like having that one thing that remains the same. Yeah. And having that as an anchor. So with that, like I wanted to ask you, like, I know this is kind of out of script, but it's like, what is some practical ways that people that are right now, like let's say that, you know, there's someone on the other side, either the screen or either if you're in your car, wherever you are, let's say someone is right now just feeling that heaviness and that burdensome of being like, I'm not liked. I am right now just like, you know, I don't know who I am. Maybe they're losing friendships. Like let's say they literally lost all their friends and all they're left with is just themselves. And all they can think about is, what did I do wrong? Yeah. How did I do this? Yeah. And maybe they didn't do anything wrong. I don't know what the situation may be. Sure. But speaking to that. Or maybe they did. That's the other thing, right? Or maybe they did, which is true. Yeah. It could be either way, right? Yeah. So many things out there. But speaking to that one person, that one male, that one female that is going through it, what would you say to that person? How can they practically start to transition into the truth? Yeah. A couple things come to mind, and they each come with a story. Because I like stories. Yeah. The first thing is, I feel like I should look into the camera for this, but not feel fake about it, because I believe this so to my very core. I'm going to try to say this without crying. You are so loved by the Lord. And I've said this several times now, so it's sounding rote, but the creator of the entire universe, if you don't believe that's true, come and talk to me, because I think I could give you some good evidence for the fact that that is true. The creator of the entire universe chose to make you. The Bible says that we're knit together in our mother's womb. There's a design, there's a creativity. He knows you. He knows what you're thinking right now. And he doesn't just love you enough to make you. Yeah. He loved you enough to rescue you from all the mess of this world and your own mess that you'll make. Yeah. And then to give part of himself to you I'm trying to get around saying the Holy Spirit, but he gives us the Holy Spirit, which is God that dwells in us and helps us live this life with a different kind of peace than anyone can experience if you don't know him. So that's the first thing. And the story that goes with it is that when I was going through my divorce, there was a moment I was driving. My kids and I were like shacking up with this family out in Katy that was letting us live with them because we were just in like a rough time. And I was driving at the West Park Tollway. I remember exactly where I was. And I shouldn't have been looking at my email, but I was. And I got a really devastating email about stuff with lawyers and whatever. I mean, I really was like, this is life-changing. And it was really late at night. And I thought, I can't call my mom or my sister. Those are kind of my go-to. But I had a sister on the West Coast. I'm like, ooh, she's 2 hours behind. So I'll call her. And I called her and she didn't answer, which if you're watching, Emily, rude. Oh my gosh, I'm still not over that. No, I'm kidding. And then I had this, as I was driving, I'm like, my life is falling apart. I said this to myself, I have no one. I have no one. I'm utterly alone. And I heard the words kind of come out of my mouth like, Sarah, like, you know better. Like, you know that that's not true. And so I was like, well, God, I guess all I have is you left. I mean, what a terrible thing to say to the Lord. But that was the space I was in. And so I prayed out loud and I was angry. There was a very Job prayer. It was like, why? You know? But recognizing I wasn't alone was a game changer. Now, it's still good to have people in your life. So I'm not trying to say, like, if you're alone, all you need is Jesus. Because no, we're meant to live in community, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think it's important to kind of take stock of the person that you actually are at your core, even if you think that's not what the world wants or needs. And really start, maybe even write down, like, I am, like, here's something about me. So when I was in college, going off to college, so I was not popular in high school because I was the pastor's kid and people thought I was lame. And I, like, quite honestly, probably was lame. Anyway, when I went off to college, I had in my head, I don't know where I got this from because my family's so cool and normal, but somehow I had in my head that Christian women are supposed to be like sweet and quiet and kind of bake muffins and I don't talk in this voice, I don't know, and just be like vulnerable and sweet and I don't know. And I'm a loudmouth and I tell irreverent jokes and I'm like kind of crazy, you know? And so I was hanging out with actually the Baptists, which is just so funny because I went there because that's where the cute boys were. The Baptist Student Union is where all the cute boys were. So I was hanging out with them in college. And there was a girl, she was a senior. I don't even know this girl's last name. She does not know that I exist. She like graduated before I ever had the chance to tell her this. But she was loud and she was funny. And she was just like beaming with something like otherworldly. Like she was so cool, but she was not quiet and she did not bake muffins. And she like the stereotype or the caricature I had in my mind, like she blew it out of the water and it gave me this freedom to be like, oh, I don't need to be a thing. I need to be the best version of me. So what I would tell someone is like really give some thought to what is your personality? Are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? What things do you like? What things do you believe? What do you think is true, even if everyone in the world thinks that's ridiculous? Like to start kind of cultivating, this is who I am. Am I bold enough to go into the world and actually be that person, my real self? And I'll tell you, the payoff is huge because one, you don't have to do any more pretending, any more curating, any more like self, like walking on eggshells. Just be you. It sounds so like, I don't know, like an after school special, like, just be you.
Be yourself.
But a little bit because God has made you to be your own unique participant in this world that he's made. So, and he will help you do the best version of that, right? Like,
No, I love that. I think that I once heard, you know, be yourself because there's no one else like you. And I think oftentimes people want to fall into comparison, which we'll not get into this episode. But I think that is something that does intend to happen where it's like, well, I mean, or setting yourself to a standard that honestly you cannot meet because that's not who you are.
Right.
And that's also difficult within itself. So I think that what your message really speaks high volumes. And I pray and I hope that whoever's listening on the other side who is currently going through this fear, I hope that you really do listen in and that you believe this and that you understand that like, hey, you are you. And this too shall pass, meaning like this is you're not gonna be here forever. You're not gonna be sad forever. You're not gonna be alone forever. Because trust me.
Well, you're not alone now.
You're not alone now. Exactly. You're not alone now. But just trust me, like, even when you try to force yourself into this place of loneliness, people will seek you out. And like it just happens sometimes.
Sometimes it happens, but I want to be careful not to say like, so I hate when people say everything happens for a reason, because while like my worldview actually says that's true, I think sometimes people mean something else. So here's the really blunt reality. Like it might not get better.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I hope that it will. And I think there are ways that you can cultivate, like you can get a counselor and you can, whatever. But life actually might suck.
That's
And
true.
I mean, one of the, I talked about a couple passages in scripture that I don't like. And there's another one that says, like, in this life, you're going to have trouble. But then it says, but take heart. It's Jesus talking, have overcome the world. So the worst case scenario is that this life is really hard. Yeah. And the only thing that you can kind of put your weight down on and have confidence in is that Christ is with you. And he says he'll never leave you or forsake you. But that's not a small thing. Like, that's to be known and loved by your King, the creator of the universe, your rescuer, your savior, is everything. So I only say that because I would never want to, I used to be a therapist, and I would never want to say to someone like, it's going to get better, because likely it will, but sometimes it doesn't. I mean, sometimes we pray for someone that's really sick and they still die, right? Yeah, sometimes we want a relationship to work and there's a breakup. And that's true. So the world is hard. Yeah. But take heart, Christ has overcome the world.
And let me also rephrase as well, because I know that, like, even though I say, like, this too shall pass, it's like, you're right, it's not going to get any better, but it will, if your perspective and you hold on to the truth, it's almost like that feeling or that circumstance begins to become smaller. Yeah. Because something else becomes bigger. Yes. But I love that you, like, stepped in, because then that's, like, perfect, because it allows me the moment to just be able to like let me just preface, which is that is the truth. And when I say, like, just you don't have to walk alone, it's like I walked into a completely new, like, church that I'd never gone to, for example, or a community, and I was honestly not going there to find friends. I was going there just to receive and just learn, and then through that it was almost like I couldn't escape. Yeah. And I just got surrounded by so much love. Yeah. And I think that when you're surrounded by people that are themselves, they're authentic, they're real, it's almost like you're drawn to it as well, and they're drawn to you because they want you to reach their level. And so that also comes with good community, which, again, not going to be a topic for this episode, but we're just so glad that you were on this episode, and we're glad that you're here. Thank you. We'll love to let the audience know how they can reach you, what projects you have going on, what's next as well, just to give that opportunity for you to express it to our audience.
So you can find me everywhere. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and the website for the nonprofit that I run is theologybythepint.org. And it has a way that you can contact me, and it has, like, a little blurb about, like, who I am and what I believe and stuff, as well as our other leaders. And then, we always have events going on every month and then some. So check us out there. I mean, we've got stuff coming up about aliens and demons and Christian nationalism and gender and identity and, like, who to vote for. We're going to do one in October right before I know. We're not going to tell you who to vote for. Don't worry. But you know in your heart. No, let me stop. I'm just messing with you. But and you can find me through Leslie too. So and really do reach out if something today if you have a question or if you do feel alone. Because I'd be happy to talk with you, and I know Leslie would too.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And just as a reminder, to become free from the lies, you first must recognize them, bring them to light, and then replace them with the truth. It is a journey, but you must begin. And so we are just glad that you tuned in for today and that you were here with my special guest, Sarah Stone. And until next time.